It was 2 a.m. when the call came. Not the usual kind, a frantic nurse on the other end, but a hushed, almost panicked tone from Dr. Anya Sharma, the head of cardiology at St. Jude's. "Evelyn, it's about the heartbeat 5. We had another one. A young patient. Complete device failure, sudden as lightning." My name's Dr. Evelyn Reed. For 25 years, I've lived and breathed biomedical engineering, designing and refining the very medical devices that keep people alive. Pacemakers, defibrillators, intricate surgical tools. If it goes inside a human body to save a life, I've probably had a hand in its creation. I joined OmniMed Solutions a decade ago, drawn by their reputation for innovation and, more importantly, their supposed commitment to patient safety. I climbed the ranks, eventually becoming the lead engineer on the Heartbeat series, our flagship line of pacemakers. My team and I poured our lives into those devices, knowing that every circuit, every line of code could mean the difference between life and death. We weren't just building electronics, we were building futures, second chances. I've spent countless nights reviewing clinical trial data, meticulously cross-referencing every single metric, obsessed with perfection, because when it comes to a human heart, anything less is simply unacceptable. And that's why Anya's call, the third one in as many months about a Heartbeat 5 failure, hit me like a punch to the gut. The Heartbeat 5 was supposed to be our masterpiece. Smaller, more efficient, longer battery life. It had passed every internal test, every regulatory hurdle. We'd launched it with such fanfare, promising a new era of cardiac health. But 3 failures in 3 months, all abrupt, all in relatively young, stable patients? That wasn't just a glitch, it was a crisis. "Are you sure it's not patient-related, Anya? Underlying conditions we missed?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper against the late-night silence of my home office. I was already pulling up data on my second screen, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "We've done full autopsies on all 3, Evelyn. Device logs show sudden, unrecoverable cessation of pulse generation. No prior warnings, no battery drain, just nothing." Her voice cracked. "The latest patient was a 17-year-old girl. She was supposed to graduate next spring." A cold dread settled in my stomach, familiar yet more intense than ever before. It was the same unsettling feeling I'd been battling for months, a quiet alarm bell that had grown louder with each passing week. Ever since the Heartbeat 5 project accelerated, something had felt off. Our original bid to the regulatory bodies promised a new generation microprocessor, rigorously tested for extreme conditions. The specs Clint Reynolds, our VP of Product Development, dropped on my desk 6 months ago, told a different story. Clint, a man who spoke in buzzwords and projected quarterly earnings like gospel, had never designed a single circuit in his life. Before coming to OmniMed, he'd been a financial analyst on Wall Street, famous for turning struggling portfolios into gold mines, even if it meant cutting corners others wouldn't dare. He joined OmniMed 2 years ago, brought in specifically to optimize our R&D expenditures. And now he was optimizing lives. "This new chip is cheaper, Evelyn," Clint had said, leaning against my desk, his designer suit uncreased even after a cross-country flight. "We save nearly 20% on materials alone. Corporate loves efficiency." He tossed the new component specs on my desk like they were yesterday's stock report. I picked them up, my heart sinking as I read. The PSI rating, the thermal tolerance, the power consumption, all were marginally lower than our original design, the one we'd put our name on for the FDA. Marginally, yes, but for a device meant to literally keep a heart beating for a decade or more, margins mattered. "This doesn't meet the long-term stress requirements, Clint," I'd said, keeping my voice level, forcing myself to sound professional, not furious. especially not for the extreme physiological demands of a pacemaker. It might hold up for a few years, but under prolonged use, with constant thermal and electrical fluctuations, we're looking at accelerated degradation. It's a ticking time bomb. Clint's eyes narrowed. Evelyn, we've been through this. You worry too much about every micro detail. Real innovators know how to maximize output while getting the job done. The chip meets minimum industry standards. That's what matters. Minimum. The word grated on me. Our mission statement wasn't minimum. It was excellence in life-saving technology. I remembered the countless hours I'd spent in labs, testing prototypes to destruction, pushing them beyond their supposed limits, all to ensure they could withstand the unpredictable, messy reality of a human body. My mentor, Dr. Lena Hansen, used to say, "Evelyn, when you're dealing with life, good enough is never good enough. Always build for the worst-case scenario, because for some patient, it will be." Lena passed away last year, but her words still echoed in my mind every time I picked up a schematic. I set the specs down. This isn't about feeling better about engineering margins, Clint. This is about device integrity and patient safety. The market doesn't need to know every technical specification, he shot back, his voice rising. They just need a device that looks good and passes basic initial screening. It's about perception, Evelyn, not perfection. Something cold, metallic, settled in my gut. This wasn't the first time. For months, Clint had been pushing cheaper components, faster testing cycles, and what he called creative interpretations of regulatory guidelines. The other engineers, good people, many with families and mortgages, went along with it. So did I. But I also had something else, a conscience. "I need to review this with the validation team," I said, stalling for time, desperately trying to find a way out of this ethical quicksand. Clint straightened up, his smile, if you could call it that, hardening into a grim line. "There's nothing to review. Corporate already approved it. Production starts next Monday. That's final." After he left, I sat in my lab for 20 minutes, staring at those revised component specifications. I thought about the thousands of patients who would receive a Heartbeat 5, unaware of the compromised core. I thought about my own mother, who relied on a pacemaker, an older model, one I'd helped design years ago, built with no compromises. I thought about how I'd sleep at night, knowing I'd signed off on a device designed to fail prematurely. That's when I made my first call. Not to a colleague, not to my husband, but to a former professor, an expert in materials science who I trusted implicitly. He'd helped me on countless tricky problems throughout my career. My journey into biomedical engineering was inspired by my grandfather, a man whose life was extended by a pacemaker after a heart attack. He taught me that true innovation wasn't just about making things smaller or faster, but about making them reliable, trustworthy. "Measure twice, implant once, Evelyn," he used to quip, "and never let anyone pressure you into putting your name on something you wouldn't put in your own family." He passed away peacefully at 92, outliving his first pacemaker by 20 years. By then, I was already lead engineer on the Heartbeat 3. I promised myself I'd build devices the way he would have wanted. No shortcuts, no regrets. My husband, David, a kind and steady hand who worked as a software architect, understood the silent pressure I was under. We'd been married 20 years, and he knew I brought work stress home sometimes, but he also knew I couldn't compromise on patient safety. "You do what you think is right, Ev," he told me that Friday night as I explained the component situation. "We'll figure out the rest." Our son, Leo, who was 15 and obsessed with robotics, was doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked up when I mentioned the Heartbeat 5.
Isn't that the new pacemaker that's supposed to be super small, Mom? My friend Maya's grandpa is on the waiting list for one. My chest tightened. I'd seen Maya and her grandpa at the park just last week, walking their dog. The thought of that little girl's grandpa, of thousands of other grandpas, grandmas,
Parents, and even teenagers relying on a compromised device was a constant, gnawing pain. The warning signs with Clint had been building for months. It started small, switching to a cheaper adhesive for the device casing, reducing the number of stress tests on the battery cells. Each time I raised concerns, each time Clint dismissed them. "You're not seeing the big picture, Evelyn," he'd say. "Medical device manufacturing is about meeting regulatory deadlines and budget targets. Everything else is just paperwork." But the paperwork mattered. FDA guidelines existed for reasons, written in the painful history of failed trials and patient harm. I'd studied every major medical device recall in my career. The faulty hip implants, the malfunctioning insulin pumps, the contaminated surgical mesh, they all started the same way. Someone decided that good enough was actually good enough. 3 weeks earlier, I'd overheard Clint on a phone call with corporate. He was bragging about cost savings on recent product lines, talking about managing regulatory relationships, using phrases like testing flexibility and value engineering. I'd seen the financial reports too. OmniMed Solutions was struggling. 2 major drug trials had failed the previous year, costing us billions. The company was bidding aggressively on every device contract, often below what the R&D truly cost. They were making up the difference by cutting component quality and pressuring development teams to accelerate timelines. I understood the business pressure. What I couldn't understand was using human lives as the solution. That weekend, I drove to our manufacturing plant after hours, stood where the Heartbeat 5 would be assembled, thousands upon thousands of them. Imagined them inside chests, regulating heartbeats, giving people back their lives. They deserved better than Clint's cost-saving measures. They deserved the device I'd originally promised to build. Monday morning arrived with the sterile hum of the clean room. I showed up early, hoping to have another conversation with Clint, maybe find a compromise that would satisfy corporate while meeting my uncompromising safety standards. Instead, I found the component delivery trucks already lined up outside the plant. The technicians were checking manifests, preparing to integrate the substandard microprocessors. I recognized the lead technician, Maria, who had been on my team for years, overseeing quality control. "Morning, Dr. Reeve," Maria called out, her brow furrowed. "Got a change in the chip order. These specs seem less robust than usual." I walked over and checked her delivery ticket. The microprocessor strength was exactly what Clint had ordered, 20% below our original specification. Perfectly legal for a simple consumer electronic device, completely inadequate for a life-sustaining implant. "Maria," I said quietly, "hold off on processing these chips until I clear something with the office." She nodded, sensing something was gravely wrong. I found Clint in his glass-walled office, reviewing production schedules with 2 junior project managers. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Evelyn, I hope you're not here to restart yesterday's conversation." "I am," I said, my voice steady. "These microprocessors won't hold up under the specified physiological load. When the device is implanted, we'll have premature degradation, possibly complete failure within 5 years, maybe sooner." The junior managers looked uncomfortable. One of them, Ben, had worked under me for 3 years. He knew my reputation for uncompromising quality. Clint stood up. "Evelyn, I'm going to say this one more time. Corporate has approved these specifications. The chips meet minimum regulatory requirements. We are not spending an extra 20% to make you feel better about engineering margins." "It's not about margins," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's about doing the science right. It's about human lives."
The job, Clint said, his voice rising, is to get these devices on the market on time, period. If you can't handle that level of responsibility, maybe you need to find another line of work. The office went quiet. Ben and the other managers stared at their tablets, pretending not to listen. I looked at Clint for a long moment, thought about my 25 years in this field, thought about the reputation I'd built, thought about all the patients who were alive today because I insisted on doing things right. Then I thought about Maya's grandpa.
"I won't sign off on a device that compromises patient safety," I said. "Find someone else." Clint's face flushed crimson. "You're fired. Pack your things and get off my site." I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just nodded and walked out of the office. As I loaded my lab equipment into my car, I saw Ben watching from the window. He looked like he wanted to say something, but stayed put. I drove away from OmniMed Solutions, knowing I'd made the right choice. What Clint didn't know was that I'd already made 3 phone calls over the weekend. The real work was just beginning. That afternoon, I called David from my car outside a coffee shop on University Drive. "How did it go?" he asked. "I'm unemployed," I said. Silence on the other end. Then, "Good. You couldn't live with yourself if you'd backed down." He was right. But being right doesn't pay the mortgage or Leo's robotics camp tuition. I spent the rest of the week making calls to other medical device companies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. My reputation for innovation and meticulous design opened doors, but the conversations all ended the same way. Everyone knew I'd been fired from OmniMed. In the medical device niche, word travels faster than a pacemaker signal. "Dr. Reed, you're a legend," said Dr. Anya Sharma, the same cardiologist who had called me about the device failures, now speaking to me as a potential employer. "But I can't afford to hire someone who won't follow orders from management. This is a business, not a research lab." Another company CEO was more direct. "Look, we all know Clint Reynolds. He's got friends on the regulatory boards. Nobody wants trouble with OmniMed Solutions. Maybe try looking outside Texas." By Friday, I realized I was being blacklisted. Clint had made calls, spread the word that I was difficult to manage and inflexible about cost controls in a tight industry where everyone knew everyone. That was a career death sentence. But I had something Clint didn't expect: documentation. Over the weekend, I compiled everything I'd gathered during the 3 weeks before my firing. Emails showing the microprocessor specification changes, purchase orders revealing the cost-cutting measures, photos of the original schematics compared to the modified designs, text messages between Clint and the new chip supplier discussing flexibility and cost optimization regarding performance requirements. I also had something else: video footage. The previous month, sensing something was amiss, I'd started discreetly recording key meetings and component delivery inspections with my phone. Standard practice for protecting yourself against liability claims in a complex industry. What I'd captured was Clint explicitly instructing manufacturing supervisors to bypass certain quality control checks and discussing how to manage external audits and regulatory visits. He even talked about using phrases like adaptive testing protocols and streamlined validation processes to placate inspectors. Monday morning, I drove to the local FDA field office on Stemmons Freeway. The chief inspector, Robert Bob Davis, had worked with me on dozens of device certifications over the years. He knew my reputation for rigorous, compliant work. "Evelyn," he said, looking surprised when I walked into his office, "I heard about the situation at OmniMed. I'm sorry." "Bob, I need to file a formal device deviation report," I said, setting a thick folder on his desk. His expression grew serious. "What kind of deviation?" I opened the folder and showed him the microprocessor specifications, explained the projected degradation rates, walked him through the emails and purchase orders. Bob studied the documents for 30 minutes, occasionally asking highly technical questions about load-bearing capacity and thermal dissipation. His frown deepened as he reviewed the evidence. "Evelyn, this is substantial," he said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. "If what you're showing me is accurate, this represents a significant Class 1 safety violation.
We'll have to issue an immediate recall and shut down the production line pending a full review. It's accurate, I said, my voice firm. Every document is dated and verified. I have video evidence of internal discussions about these changes, too.
He leaned back in his chair, a grave look on his face. You understand that filing this report will trigger a formal investigation. We'll have to seize production records, quarantine all current stock, and potentially halt distribution of all Heartbeat 5 devices already in the market. I understand. The thought of thousands of pacemakers already implanted, potentially failing, made my stomach clench. You also understand that OmniMed Solutions will know you filed the complaint, Bob added. I nodded. I'm prepared for that. Bob picked up his phone. I'm calling our rapid response team right now. We'll have agents at the OmniMed plant within the hour. As I left the FDA office, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stay out of business. This doesn't concern you anymore. Some careers can't be rebuilt. CR. Clint was playing hardball, but he'd made one critical mistake. He thought I was fighting for my job. I wasn't fighting for my job. I was fighting for those patients' lives, and I'd already taken steps he couldn't undo. That evening, I received a call from David. His voice was tight with worry. Ev, Leo came home from school today asking questions. Some of his friends' parents work at OmniMed. They're saying you're causing problems for hardworking people, that you're trying to shut down a vital medical supply line. The smear campaign had started. Clint wasn't just trying to blacklist me professionally. He was going after my family's reputation in the community. I sat in my car outside our house, looking at the windows where my husband and son were probably discussing whether their wife and mother was doing the right thing. For the first time since this whole situation started, a sliver of doubt crept in. Had I made a mistake? Then I remembered Anya Sharma's panicked call about the 17-year-old girl, and I knew I hadn't. The FDA Rapid Response Team arrived at the OmniMed Solutions manufacturing plant Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. I wasn't there to see it, but Ben, one of the junior project managers, called me an hour later. Dr. Reed, you need to know what happened, he said, his voice shaky. The FDA agents showed up with a warrant and shut everything down. Clint went ballistic, started yelling about disgruntled former employees causing trouble. The lead agent told him to call his lawyer. What about the microprocessors? I asked, my heart pounding. They seized all incoming shipments, took samples from the batches already in the clean room for testing. They also took core samples from the finished Heartbeat 5 devices that were in final packaging, ready for distribution. That was critical. If those finished devices showed compromised components, it would prove this wasn't just a planned change, but an already implemented one. It would confirm systematic fraud. Ben, what aren't you telling me? Long pause. Dr. Reed, there's something else. The agents asked questions about other recent product lines. They had a list of devices where we used this same new component supplier. The Heartbeat 4.5, the OmniPump insulin delivery system, even some of the surgical ablation catheters. This isn't just about the Heartbeat 5 anymore. My stomach dropped. If Bob Davis was investigating multiple product lines, it meant the FDA had found a pattern of systematic ethical violations. This was bigger than one compromised pacemaker. Did they mention any specific projects? The CardioStim defibrillator line, the Neurolink brain stimulator from last year, the VitaSense glucose monitor. Dr. Reed, we've been using that cheap component supplier on a lot of our newer devices. I thought about all those devices, all those people depending on them for critical health management. The CardioStim alone was implanted in tens of thousands of patients annually. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a materials science expert who'd worked on several of my early projects before moving to a consulting firm in Seattle.
Evelyn, I heard about the situation in Dallas, Marcus said. I've been doing some research on component failures in high-end medical devices in North America. Your timing might be perfect. What do you mean?
4 weeks ago, I was hired by a major malpractice insurance company to investigate device failures at a hospital in Houston. Guess who the manufacturer was? OmniMed Solutions. Bingo! And guess which component supplier they used for a batch of their Heartbeat 4.5 pacemakers? The same one Clint has been pushing for the Heartbeat 5. The hospital is facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from families of patients who experienced premature device failure. The component's actual long-term performance is about 50% of what's listed on their internal documentation. 50%! Evelyn, I think your former company has been systematically using substandard materials and falsifying internal performance data. This could be criminal fraud, not just regulatory violations. That evening, I drove to the OmniMed Solutions plant. The gates were locked. Yellow caution tape wrapped around the perimeter of the manufacturing facility. A large sign posted by the FDA read, "Production halted pending safety investigation. Unauthorized entry prohibited." I sat in my car across the street, watching the empty, silent building where thousands of life-saving devices should have been meticulously assembled. My phone rang. Patricia. "Ev, you need to come home. There's a man here who says he's a reporter from the Dallas Morning News. He's asking questions about the Heartbeat 5 project." The story was going public. When I got home, the reporter was sitting at our kitchen table with David and Leo. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of eager expression that suggested he smelled a big story. "Dr. Reed," he said, standing up to shake my hand, "I'm Ben Carter from the Dallas Morning News. I understand you filed the complaint that shut down the Heartbeat 5 production line at OmniMed Solutions." "I filed a safety report with the FDA," I said carefully. "Sources tell me this involves allegations of widespread use of substandard components in critical medical devices. Can you comment on that?" I looked at David, then at Leo. My son was watching me with a mixture of pride and worry. "Patients deserve safe devices," I said finally. "That's all I'm trying to ensure." The reporter smiled. "Dr. Reed, I think you're going to want to hear what else I've discovered about OmniMed Solutions." Ben Carter opened his laptop on our kitchen table and pulled up a spreadsheet with dozens of entries. "I've been investigating medical device irregularities in North Texas for 6 months," he said. "Your complaint gave me the missing piece I needed." The spreadsheet showed a pattern of OmniMed Solutions devices where hospitals or patients had reported unexpected premature failures, unusual component degradation, or unexplainable performance issues. 32 devices over the past 4 years, all using the same new component supplier that Clint had tried to force on the Heartbeat 5 project. "The CardioStim defibrillator line has seen a 15% increase in unexpected battery drainage," Mr. Carter continued, "and the Neuralink brain stimulator has intermittent signal loss problems that shouldn't exist with proper shielding." Leo leaned forward, studying the screen. "Mom, how many people could get hurt if these devices have problems?" "Potentially thousands, honey," I said quietly. Ben Carter nodded. "That's why this story matters. But I need more than allegations. I need proof of systematic fraud." "What kind of proof?" "Internal communications, financial records, testimony from workers who witnessed the component substitutions." I thought about Ben, the junior project manager, and the other engineers and technicians who'd seen what was happening but kept quiet to protect their jobs. Good people with families, afraid to speak up against a system that punished honesty. "I might be able to help with that," I said. The next morning, I made a series of carefully planned phone calls. First, I called Ben, asked him to meet me for coffee off-site. When he arrived at the diner on Mockingbird Lane, he looked exhausted. "Dr. Reed, they've got us working 18-hour days trying to re-verify every component. Clint's furious about the investigation. He's blaming everything on you." "Ben, how many guys on the team have documentation about the component changes? Texts, emails, photos?" He shifted uncomfortably.
Most of us, we document everything to cover ourselves if something goes wrong. But Dr. Reed, if we turn that stuff over, we'll all get fired.
If you don't turn it over, Ben, patients could get hurt, maybe killed. Ben stared into his coffee for a long moment. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to do the right thing, like I did. That afternoon, Ben called me back. There are 7 engineers and technicians willing to provide documentation, but we need guarantees, protection from retaliation, a legal shield. I connected him with Ben Carter, the reporter, who then connected him with an attorney specializing in whistleblower protection in the medical device niche. Meanwhile, I received another unexpected call. Dr. Reed, this is attorney Sarah Chen from Chen & Associates. I represent several hospitals and patient advocacy groups who've experienced unexplained device failures with products manufactured by OmniMed Solutions. I'd like to discuss your expert testimony in upcoming litigation. Expert testimony? My 25 years of experience suddenly had legal value beyond OmniMed's walls. How many cases are we talking about? Potentially hundreds. Your documentation could be crucial in establishing a pattern of negligent manufacturing practices and outright fraud. That weekend, I received the best news yet. Bob Davis called with the component test results. Evelyn, the microprocessors from the Heartbeat 5 line tested at 42% below specified performance for long-term stress. The samples from the CardioStim defibrillator line are even worse. We're talking about device integrity failure within 2 to 3 years under normal physiological conditions. What happens now? Full-scale federal investigation, criminal referral to the Department of Justice for wire fraud and endangering public health. And Evelyn, the major hospital networks want to meet with you about new device procurement policies and consulting on supplier vetting. David was in the kitchen making dinner when I hung up. Leo was doing homework at the table where Ben Carter had first shown us the scope of OmniMed's problems. Mom, Leo said, looking up from his physics textbook, my friend Maya asked me something today. She said her grandpa's still waiting for a Heartbeat 5, and her parents want to know if he should get one. I smiled. Tell Maya's parents that her grandpa's going to get the best pacemaker possible because we're making sure of it. Leo grinned. So, we're the good guys in this story? We're the guys who tell the truth, I said. Sometimes that's the same thing. The Dallas Morning News ran Ben Carter's investigation as a front-page series titled Heart of Darkness: How One Medical Device Company Put Profits Before Patients. The first article hit newsstands on a Thursday morning in February. By noon, the Department of Justice had announced a criminal investigation into OmniMed Solutions for fraud and endangering public health. By 3 p.m., the company's stock had dropped 45%. By 5 p.m., Clint Reynolds was being escorted out of his office by federal agents carrying boxes of evidence. I was sitting in Chen & Associates' conference room when my phone buzzed with the news alert. Attorney Sarah Chen looked up from the witness preparation documents we'd been reviewing. How does it feel to see justice in action? She asked. Like those patients can finally get the safe devices they deserve, I said. The criminal charges against Clint Reynolds and other key OmniMed Solutions executives were extensive. Wire fraud for falsifying component specifications, conspiracy to commit fraud for the systematic material substitutions, endangering public health for knowingly compromising the integrity of life-saving devices. But the civil litigation was where the real accountability happened. 28 hospitals and patient advocacy groups filed massive class action lawsuits seeking damages for device failures and the immense costs associated with patient harm and recalls. The major insurance companies that had covered OmniMed's products joined the suits, seeking reimbursement for fraudulent claims. Ben, the junior project manager, and 6 other engineers and technicians provided crucial testimony and documentation that sealed the case. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of text messages discussing creative component substitutions, emails detailing cost-saving schemes at the expense of safety, and financial records showing kickbacks from the substandard supplier.
The video footage I'd captured, showing Clint explicitly discussing how to manipulate testing results and circumvent regulatory oversight, was damning. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Clint Reynolds receive a sentence of 7 years in prison and full restitution to affected hospitals and patient families. The judge's words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet courtroom. Mr. Reynolds, your actions endangered the lives of thousands of people. Medical device professionals hold a sacred trust to design and manufacture products that protect and extend human life. You violated that trust for profit with callous disregard for the well-being of the most vulnerable. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into bright April sunshine. Ben Carter, the reporter from the Dallas Morning News, was waiting on the steps with his camera crew. "Dr. Reed, any comments on today's outcome?" I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The choice between keeping my prestigious job and keeping my conscience. The months of legal battles, the veiled threats from Clint's remaining supporters, the nights David and I had stayed awake wondering if we'd done the right thing, if we'd risked too much. I thought about Anya Sharma's call, about the 17-year-old girl, and about Maya's grandpa. Those patients are going to get the safe devices they deserve, I said, looking directly into the camera. That's all that matters. Spring bloomed early in Dallas that year. I stood in the clean room of a brand new medical device facility, reviewing the final quality control reports for a new generation of pacemakers. Perfect specifications, premium materials, everything those patients deserved. After the OmniMed scandal broke, the major hospital networks had approached me. They formed a new consortium, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to developing and procuring medical devices with unparalleled safety standards. They'd asked me to serve as their chief medical device officer, overseeing all research, development, and manufacturing partnerships. It was the kind of offer that restored faith in the entire niche. "Dr. Reed, the board of directors wants to do a walkthrough," called out Lisa Chen, my new head of regulatory affairs. She was the kind of medical device professional who understood that safety and quality weren't optional. They were the absolute core of the mission. As we toured the gleaming, state-of-the-art facility, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Losing my job had led to finding my true purpose. Standing up for what was right had created opportunities I never could have imagined. David and Leo visited the facility that afternoon. Leo brought his drone to document the manufacturing process for a school project about local heroes. "Mom, remember Maya's grandpa?" he said, flying the drone carefully over a precise assembly line. "He just got his new pacemaker last week. Maya says he's doing great. Tell Maya that her grandpa's device is going to keep his heart beating strong for a very long time," I said, a profound sense of peace settling over me. Leo grinned. "So, we really were the good guys in this story." "We're the people who demand the truth," I said. "And sometimes, son, that's the most heroic thing of all." That evening, I drove home through the familiar Dallas streets, past hospitals where I knew the devices I'd helped design, the ones built with integrity, were silently doing their life-saving work. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben, the junior project manager who'd found a new role as a lead engineer at a reputable, ethically driven medical device startup in Boston. "Saw the news about your new facility opening. Proud to have learned from you, Dr. Reed." I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house David and I had built our lives in. A good foundation, solid walls, a place where truth had been worth more than convenience. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, and sometimes it gives you everything back.